And that's why sort of towards the end, I bring up this claim of Tony Bobulinski's that when he said to Jimmy Biden something along the lines of, how are you getting away with this? He looked at him and said, plausible deniability. And that is a phrase that really seems to apply to so many of the episodes that I cover in the book. And I asked, I reached out to Jimmy and a representative of Jimmy's to ask if this conversation actually took place, as Bobulinski describes. He didn't respond. That phrase sort of resonated with me after writing about 50 years or so of the family's business dealings.
Well, right. Even just that one line, the 10% to the big guy, theoretically, that's like the biggest story in the world, right? Like if there's anything to that, but there's
Can you
nothing.
just explain that for people who haven't read the book who may not know what?
Maybe Ben should explain.
Yeah, sure. So Jimmy and Hunter enter into talks with Chinese oil mogul named Yi Jinming. There are a variety of ventures that are on the board, that are on the table. One of which was a natural gas project in Louisiana that they were discussing collaborating on. And they had some Western business partners as well. And one of them in this email that was, first reported out of this laptop week is describing what they're proposing as a equity breakdown for, who's going to hold what shares in this venture that they're planning. And there's a line 10 held by H for the big guy, which, the immediate question, and it has a question mark at the end as if that's, not completely settled. And the question that raises is, is that 10 held by Hunter for his father, Joe Biden? And Tony Bobulinski, who's one of the recipients of this email, came forward right after, was working with some Republican operatives, obviously in the heat of a presidential campaign, though he had mostly donated to Democrats in his previous political giving, at least at the national level, said, yes, that means what you think it means. They were talking about Hunter holding equity on behalf of his father, Joe Biden. And the Biden campaign said, no, Joe Biden has never even considered going into business with his family or holding equity in an overseas venture. This technically, I think, was about a venture in Louisiana, but nonetheless, they issued a pretty broad denial. But what they didn't do is reiterate what Joe Biden had said on the campaign trail when my colleague Mark Caputo asked him about this in 2019, not about this specifically, asked him about his relatives' business dealings. And he said that he had never discussed his relatives' business dealings with them or anybody else ever. And one of the things Bobulinski was saying was that's not true. In 2017 in Los Angeles, when you were there for the Milken conference and I was about to go into business in this venture with Jimmy and Hunter, you and I talked about this venture, or, Joe Biden and I talked about this venture. And so that is something else that sort of hangs over this bigger picture of, Joe Biden, when he was running for president, issued this blanket assurance that he had never discussed his relatives' business dealings with them or anybody. And even at the time, there was some questions about, you're very close with your family. You've never discussed their business ventures with them ever. And now you have somebody who is directly contradicting that statement. And Biden and his representatives aren't saying, no, that's a lie. They're not saying that Bobulinski is fabricating this conversation. So it invites the question of whether what he said was true on the campaign trail.
Hello, thank you so much for listening to and watching Useful Idiots. For full episodes and extended interviews, please subscribe at usefulidiots.substack.com. You can subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/usefulidiots for clips, live streams, and full episodes. Also, subscribe to us wherever you find your podcast. Follow us on Twitter at UsefulIdiotPod and use the hashtag UsefulIdiotsPod. Join us Mondays at 10 a.m. for the Useful Idiots Monday Morning Show, where we discuss the Sunday morning news shows so you don't have to watch them.